The pregnancy test hit the bathroom counter with a sound like breaking glass. 2 unmistakable lines. Not a question. A verdict written in biology that no amount of wealth or power could negotiate away. Ji-won stood with her back against the cold marble wall of her penthouse bathroom in Cheongdam, her chest rising and falling in short, uneven bursts. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear, not entirely. It was something more complicated than that. Something that lived in the space between joy and absolute terror. She pressed her palm flat against her sternum, as if she could slow the riot happening inside her chest. She was pregnant. Welcome back to Story Vault, the home of stories that pull you in, keep you up at night, and leave you wanting more. What you're about to hear is one of the most emotionally complex stories we've ever told. It's about power, control, and what happens when the most dangerous man in Seoul falls in love with the one woman who refuses to be owned. And the father was Kang Min-jun, a man whose name alone could move markets. A man whose family controlled a commercial empire that stretched across 3 continents. A man who, according to official records, was a legitimate billionaire businessman and philanthropist. But Ji-won knew the truth that the world didn't see. She knew what happened in the basement clubs of Gangnam after midnight. She knew about the men who answered directly to him. She knew about the conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. Conversations that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or board approvals. Kang Min-jun was a billionaire. But he was also something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something that lived in the shadow spaces of Seoul, in the places where legitimate power and criminal authority became indistinguishable. And she had fallen in love with him. Ji-won straightened up, splashed cold water on her face, and made a decision. She wasn't the kind of woman who hid. She never had been. So she picked up the test, tucked it into her designer blazer pocket, and walked out of her apartment into the Seoul afternoon. The Kang Corporation's headquarters rose 48 stories above Gangnam like a monument to carefully constructed power. The glass and steel caught the late sun and held it, all gold and authority and controlled dominance. Ji-won had walked through these revolving doors 100 times. She knew every inch of this building. She knew its secrets. She took the private elevator to the executive level. No one stopped her. No one ever did. She knocked twice on the penthouse office door. The one that belonged exclusively to him. Come in. His voice was quiet. Everything about Kang Min-jun was quiet. That was the thing about real power. It didn't need to announce itself. She stepped inside. The office was exactly as she remembered it. Floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Seoul like a man surveying his kingdom. Dark wood furniture that cost more than most people's houses. A single piece of modern art on the far wall. Something abstract and expensive and utterly cold. And behind the mahogany desk, him. Kang Min-jun sat with his jacket off, his white shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, a fountain pen in his hand. 42 years old. Dark eyes that held no light and reflected nothing. A jaw that looked like it had been carved from marble rather than grown. The kind of face that appeared on magazine covers not because he courted the press, but because cameras couldn't look away. He was the kind of man who looked powerful even when he was doing nothing at all. He looked up when she entered. When he saw her face, something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, barely visible. But Ji-won had learned to read him. She had learned to see the small tells that no one else caught. She closed the door behind her. She crossed the office in silence and placed the pregnancy test on his desk between them. Just laid it there. White plastic against dark mahogany. Evidence. Accusation. Truth. The silence stretched like something physical. She waited for shock. She expected him to sit back, press his fingers to his temples, start calculating like the strategic mind he was. She expected logistics, efficiency, the cold control that governed every decision he made. What she did not expect was what actually happened. He didn't flinch. He looked at the test. He looked at her. And then he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. I know. Ji-won blinked. The words didn't make sense. They didn't connect to anything. What? I know that you're pregnant, he said. His voice was steady, unsurprised. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. How could you possibly? I got you pregnant on purpose. The words hung in the air of the enormous office like smoke that wouldn't clear. Like a confession that had been waiting months to be spoken. Ji-won's brain kept trying to process them. Kept hitting the same wall. She replayed them in her mind once. Twice. 3 times. She searched his face for something. A smile, a hesitation. A sign that this was some kind of test or manipulation. There was nothing. Just Kang Min-jun sitting behind his desk, looking at her with an expression that was almost patient. Patient like a man who had already made peace with a decision that should never have been his to make. What did you just say? She whispered. Months ago, I stopped taking precautions. Without telling you. Without asking you. She laughed then. And it was the kind of laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. It was the sound of something breaking. She pressed her fingers over her mouth, turned away from him, and walked to the window. Seoul spread out below her. 48 stories down. Millions of people moving through their lives, unaware that something fundamental had just fractured in a room high above their heads. Why? She said. Not a question. A demand. Because I wanted a family. His voice came from behind her desk, steady as stone. Because I was afraid of losing you. Because every time I thought about you walking away from me, I couldn't breathe. He paused. She heard him exhale. I wanted something permanent. Ji-won turned around slowly. Very slowly. The way someone turns when they're trying not to break something inside themselves. You wanted something permanent, she repeated. And it didn't occur to you to propose? To have a conversation? To ask me what I wanted? To treat me like a human being with agency and choice? I knew you'd say no. So you decided to take the choice away from me entirely. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. There was no answer that existed for what he had done. That's not love, Min-jun, she said. Her voice was very quiet and very steady. The kind of quiet that comes from someone who has just discovered she's living with a stranger wearing a familiar face. That's control. That's the same thing you do with everything else in your life. You see something you want and you take it. You manipulate the board. You eliminate the competition. You bend Seoul itself to your will. And when that didn't work with me, when I was the one thing you couldn't control through money or strategy or power, you decided to trap me instead. Ji-won. Don't. She picked up the pregnancy test from his desk. Their eyes met for a moment. And in that moment, something died between them. Something that had never actually existed in the first place. Trust. Don't tell me it came from love. I know that it did. That's the part that makes it unbearable. She walked out of his office. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply left the test on his desk and walked out. And when the elevator doors closed behind her, she allowed herself one moment, just one, of absolute devastation. Then she made a phone call. Before we continue with what happens next, if you're feeling G1 strength right now, I need you to like this video and drop a comment. Tell me, what would you have done in her position? Because the choice she made next is going to change everything. Stick with us. Ji-won didn't go home. She didn't cry. She didn't call her best friend, or her mother, or anyone who might tell her to reconsider. Instead, she drove to Incheon International Airport. She had a passport. She had savings that had nothing to do with Kang Min-jun's money. She had a name and a reputation that belonged entirely to her. Within 4 hours, she had purchased a ticket to Bangkok. Within 6 hours, she was in the air. It wasn't Thailand permanently. Thailand was just the first place her mind went when she needed to think. A hotel on Khao San Road where no one knew her name. A place where she could sit with what had happened and not have to perform strength for anyone. She sat in that hotel room for 3 days and didn't leave. She ordered room service. She stared at the ceiling. She thought about the tiny life growing inside her. She thought about what Kang Min-jun had said with such complete composure, as though he had already made peace with the decision that should have been hers to make. You didn't choose us. You chose for me. On the 4th day, something crystallized. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't moving forward. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've been betrayed so completely that the person you thought you knew disappears entirely and leaves behind only a stranger wearing his face. She called her mother. Her mother was a woman of formidable practical instincts. She listened to everything Ji-won told her. And Ji-won told her everything, the whole truth, unedited and raw, and then she said something that changed everything. You have 2 choices. You can spend the rest of your life letting what he did define your story. Or you can rewrite it yourself. That was all. No judgment. No, I told you so. Just her mother, clear-eyed and practical, offering Ji-won the only compass that mattered. The choice to reclaim her own narrative. Ji-won came back to Seoul after 1 week. But she didn't go back to the penthouse in Cheongdam. She didn't reach out to Kang Min-jun. She didn't answer his calls. He made exactly 3 attempts before stopping, understanding perhaps that no amount of power could force someone to answer a phone. Instead, she went to see her lawyer. The documents were brutal in their clarity. She would not accept any financial support from him. The child would bear her name alone. She would not request his involvement. She would not allow him to use access to the child as leverage or connection or control. She drafted the letter herself, and it was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever written. I am resigning, effective immediately. I will not be accepting any financial support from you or your organization. This child is my business, and my business alone. I expect you to respect that completely. I will not be discussing this further. She left the letter on his desk. She didn't stay to see his reaction. Within 2 weeks, Ji-won had relocated to Busan. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She changed her number. She moved into a small apartment in Gwangbakuro with windows that looked out over the harbor. She called her mother and her sister and told them only what they needed to know. That it was over, that she was fine, that she needed space to rebuild. Her mother flew down immediately. She was a practical woman. She spent a week reorganizing the apartment, stocking the refrigerator with banchan and fresh vegetables, and left without once saying, "I told you so." Ji-won loved her for that. Starting over at 36, pregnant in a new city, was not the narrative she had imagined for herself. But Ji-won Park was fundamentally constituted for exactly this kind of moment. She didn't collapse inward. She didn't spend weeks in grief. She grieved in emotion, but her mind was already moving forward. Because for 2 years, she had been building something in the margins of her life. A business plan. A vision for a marketing consultancy that would be entirely hers. No billionaire boss. No power dynamics. No manipulation disguised as love. It had lived in a folder on her laptop, waiting for the moment she was brave enough to claim it. The betrayal had clarified something for her. She was ready. She had always been ready. She had just been choosing the safety of someone else's empire over the risk of building her own. She registered the business in her 2nd month in Busan. By the 3rd month, she had her first 3 clients. A boutique hotel chain, a cosmetic startup, and a restaurant group that wanted to expand into Seoul's luxury dining market. She named it Park & Associates. Clean. Professional. Entirely hers. By the time she was 5 months pregnant, she had 6 clients and was turning down offers. The business was profitable. It was growing. It was real. The pregnancy was uncomplicated. She found an obstetrician she trusted. She joined a prenatal yoga class where no one knew her story. She made a friend, a woman named Suk-hee who ran a bookshop 2 blocks from her apartment and brought her ramen when she worked late. There were moments, late at night, when Ji-won thought about Kang Min-jun. Not with longing, not exactly. With something more complicated. She thought about the man she had glimpsed in those early months of their relationship. The one who would call her late at night just to hear her voice. Who would ask her opinion on decisions that had nothing to do with work. Who stood in his penthouse kitchen at 2 in the morning, reading cooking recipes on his phone, trying to recreate her mother's doenjang jjigae because she had mentioned once that she missed home cooking. That man had been real. She was certain of that. The problem was that he had existed alongside another man entirely. The one who believed that wanting something badly enough justified taking it. The one who solved problems through control and manipulation. The one who saw even love as something to be strategically acquired. And she couldn't unknot those 2 people from each other. She didn't know if it was even possible. She stopped thinking about it and went to sleep. Back in Seoul, Kang Min-jun was not sleeping. For the first weeks after Ji-won left, he operated on the assumption that she would eventually resurface. That the pregnancy test, the confrontation, the letter, all of it, was temporary. A crisis to be managed like any other crisis. A problem with a solution waiting to be discovered. He didn't pursue her. He had too much pride and, more importantly, too much understanding of what he had done. He knew that showing up at her door uninvited would only confirm everything she had said about him. So he waited. He checked his phone with a frequency that he refused to acknowledge as desperate. He stood in his penthouse kitchen at midnight and realized that the doenjang jjigae recipe was still bookmarked in his browser. He had to leave the room. Weeks became a month. A month became 2. By the 3rd month, something had shifted inside him. Not in his manner, which remained exactly as controlled as always, but underneath. In the place where he had learned, very young, to keep everything locked away. The emptiness in his apartment stopped feeling temporary and became structural. He moved through his days with the same velocity as always. Board meetings, investment reviews, site visits through his various holdings. But something underneath the performance had gone quiet. Something had broken, and he had no idea how to rebuild it. His closest advisor, a man named Park Hyun-ki, who had known Kang Min-jun since his first criminal operation at 23, noticed. They were having lunch at a private club in Cheongdam when Hyun-ki set down his chopsticks and looked at him directly. "You're making reactive decisions," Hyun-ki said. "You greenlit the Shanghai expansion after 15 minutes of review. You would normally have asked for 60 days of additional analysis." "The numbers were sound," Kang Min-jun replied. "The numbers were adequate." You usually want them to be exceptional. Hyun-ki studied him. She left, and you can't figure out how to get her back. And it's the first problem in your life that money and power can't solve. Kang Min-jun said nothing. That's what I thought. Hyun-ki continued, returning to his meal. You're lost. Which means she wasn't just another woman to you. Which means you did something truly unforgivable. Still nothing. Am I right? Yes, Kang Min-jun said finally. You're right. He didn't hire investigators. He didn't use his network of contacts to track her. He knew she was in Busan because her lawyer had sent official forwarding documentation through the proper channels, and the area code on her contact number told him everything he needed to know. But that was as far as he went. He had already violated her autonomy, once in the most fundamental way he could imagine. He would not compound it with surveillance. What he could not stop was hearing about her. It started with a mention in a business newsletter, a brief item about a boutique marketing consultancy in Busan making notable inroads with luxury hospitality clients. The founder was unnamed, but the strategic approach described was unmistakably hers. The way she positioned brand narrative. The way she understood luxury consumers. The way she saw business as storytelling. He read the article 3 times. Then it was a call from a contact at a luxury hotel conference, mentioning casually that the best marketing strategist he'd encountered all year was a woman in Busan who had transformed a struggling boutique hotel group into a destination brand in 6 months. And then Hyun-ki, who understood the situation and had a commitment to honest communication that bordered on cruel, sent him a link to a feature in a prestigious Korean business magazine. The article was about women entrepreneurs transforming Busan's business landscape. Park and Associates was profiled prominently. There was a photograph of Ji-won in what appeared to be a bright, modern office space overlooking the harbor. She was visibly pregnant. She was mid-laugh at something someone off-camera had said. She was luminous. Kang Min-jun sat with that word for a very long time. Luminous. She was not struggling. She was not waiting for him to fix things. She was not secretly hoping he would come and rescue her from her own choices. She was building something extraordinary, and she was doing it entirely without him. And that truth hit him harder than any business loss ever had. Because it meant the story he had been quietly telling himself. That she needed him. That the child would need him nearby. That eventually circumstance would bring them back into each other's orbit. Was a story he had written for his own comfort. It wasn't real. He had done something unconscionable. And the woman he had done it to had responded by becoming more fully, brilliantly herself than she had ever been when he was in her life. That was when something inside Kang Min-jun actually broke open. Not broke apart, broke open. Like something sealed to, long finally giving way and letting air in. Like a dam cracking, and all the things he had spent 42 years keeping locked away, suddenly exposed to light. He made a decision that no one in his inner circle would have anticipated. He called a therapist. A real one. Not a corporate wellness consultant, or a family counselor recommended by business associates. A legitimate psychiatrist who worked with patients who carried the kind of trauma and damage that came from building empires on the backs of control and fear. The first session, he could barely speak. By the 5th, he began to articulate things he had never given language to. His childhood, the abandonment that had shaped him, the way his entire adult life had been an elaborate architecture of control. Turning fear into dominance and calling it strength. It was not a comfortable process. It was, at times, excruciating. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Kang Min-jun was being honest. Not with anyone else, only with himself. 6 months after Ji-won had walked out of his office, he received a call from Marcus Kim, a mutual friend who had known both of them since their early days in Seoul. Marcus was relocating to Busan for business. Before he went, he was calling Damien with a message. She knows you've been in therapy, Marcus said carefully. I didn't tell her. She heard it from someone who knows Hyun-ki. And she asked about you. A pause. Not what you're doing professionally. How you are. What did you tell her? Kang Min-jun asked. That I thought you were genuinely trying to change. That for the first time I believed it was real, not performative. Another pause. This one lasted longer. What did she say? She said she wasn't ready. But that she wasn't closed. Kang Min-jun exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. He understood, in a way he hadn't before, that timing was not his to control. That the only thing he could do was continue the work of becoming someone worth forgiving. If forgiveness ever came at all. 2 more weeks passed. Then Marcus, functioning as a bridge neither of them had asked for, but both of them clearly needed, arranged a dinner in Busan. A quiet restaurant in the harbor district. Midweek. No pressure implied. Just an opportunity. Kang Min-jun flew to Busan on a Thursday evening. He sat across from Ji-won for the first time in 8 months. She was 8 months pregnant. The baby was due within weeks. And she was the most composed person in the room, composed in a way that suggested she had spent 8 months becoming someone he didn't fully know. Someone stronger. Someone who had learned to trust herself in ways she never had to trust him. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the future. Not about reconciliation. About what had happened and why it had happened and what it had cost her. "I got you pregnant on purpose," he said again, this time without the armor of his office around him. Just words in a restaurant with the harbor beyond the windows. "I did it because I was afraid. Because losing you felt like a kind of death I wasn't equipped to survive. Because I had spent 40 years convinced that the only way to keep something was to control it completely." She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't soften her own account. "You violated my autonomy," she said. "You took away my choice. You made a decision about my body and my life without any regard for what I wanted or what I needed. And you did it all while calling it love. I know. You said you understood how much damage that did. But I don't think you do. Not really. I had to leave everything. I had to rebuild my entire life. I had to carry our daughter alone and wonder if I was strong enough. I had to learn to trust my own judgment again when I was questioning everything. I know. Do you?" She looked at him across the table. "Or is this just another strategy? Another way of trying to control the narrative and get what you want?" "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he said quietly. "I know I may never earn it. I'm just telling you what's true. I was wrong. Not because of the consequences. But because it was wrong in a most fundamental way. I treated you like something to be acquired instead of someone to be loved." She studied him across the table for a long moment. The man sitting across from her was the same one she had known in Seoul in one way. The jaw, the steady eyes, the quality of absolute attention he brought to everything. But there was something different underneath all of it now. Something less armored. Something that had, at real cost, been rearranged. "I need time," she said finally. "And I need you to accept that without treating it like a problem to be solved." "I will," he said. And he meant it. 3 weeks later, Ji-won went into labor at 2 in the morning. It was 6 weeks early. It was not supposed to happen this way. The contractions came fast and hard and wrong, and by the time Suki from the bookshop got her to the hospital, the medical team was moving with purpose and speaking in that specific tone that healthcare professionals use when they're trying not to alarm you while being genuinely alarmed. Blood pressure complications. The baby was in distress. They were moving her to a higher level of care. Marcus called Kang Min-jun from the waiting room. "Get here now," Marcus said. 3 words. That was all. Kang Min-jun was in Busan in 2 hours. He arrived at the hospital to find Marcus in the corridor, who told him the baby was coming, and there were complications, and that Ji-won had been moved to the obstetric ICU. "She didn't ask for you specifically," Marcus said carefully. "But she didn't say not to come." Kang Min-jun sat down in a plastic chair in a hospital hallway. He had sat in boardrooms while companies rose and fell. He had weathered financial crises and legal battles and hostile takeovers. He had ordered things done that he could never undo. He had held entire networks of people's fates in his hands. He had never in his life experienced anything like that hallway. The minutes moved like something physical. Thick. Immovable. He didn't check his phone once. He didn't calculate anything. He didn't try to solve anything. He just sat and breathed, and for the first time in his adult life, he understood that there was absolutely nothing he could do. No leverage to pull. No decision to make. No amount of money or power that could change what was happening behind those closed doors. He was entirely, completely, utterly helpless. And in that helplessness, something crystallized with a sharpness that felt almost physical. He thought about Ji-won at 28 when she must have been, bright and terrifyingly capable, starting to build the life that had brought her to this moment. He thought about her in that conference room in Seoul, pushing back against him with data and a perfectly level voice. He thought about her in Busan, 8 months pregnant, mid-laugh in a sunlit office, building something extraordinary entirely without him. He thought about what she had said to him. "You didn't choose us. You chose for me." And he understood it finally and completely. Not as an accusation, but as a map of where he had gone wrong. Why he had gone wrong there. What it would cost him to go right. At 6:47 in the morning, a nurse came into the corridor and told him, "Ms. Park delivered a healthy baby girl. She's stable. She's asking if there's someone named Min-jun in the building." Kang Min-jun, billionaire, controlled, armored, dangerous, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and fell apart completely. Just for a moment. Just enough. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and went to meet his daughter. Several months passed after that night in the hospital. They were not easy months. They were not simple ones. But they were honest. Kang Min-jun flew to Busan every Thursday and stayed through Sunday. He was present for bath times and the 3 in the morning feedings and pediatric checkups. He was present in the ordinary, unglamorous, transformative way that real presence actually requires. Not as a grand gesture. Not as a performance of redemption. But as a man showing up consistently and asking nothing in return. He and Ji-won built a co-parenting framework that was clear and respectful. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give. When she needed space, he gave it. When she reached out, he was there immediately. He funded their daughter's needs without making it transactional and without using it as leverage. Park and Associates continued to grow. By their daughter's 3rd month of life, Ji-won expanded into Seoul's luxury market. She hired 2 full-time staff members and a creative director she'd been trying to recruit for 6 months. She had an office with actual windows now, a view of the harbor and the mountains beyond. Suki, who had appointed herself honorary grandmother to the operation, babysat 2 afternoons a week and refused any compensation. Ji-won called her mother every Sunday evening. Her mother had met Kang Min-jun once briefly. Marcus had orchestrated a family dinner with the efficiency of someone who understood exactly what needed to happen. Her mother had been reserved with him, watchful. At the end of the evening, she pulled Ji-won into the kitchen and said something that stayed with her. "He's different from what I expected." "Different how?" Ji-won asked. "Less certain of himself," her mother said. "That's a good sign. Certain men are dangerous. Uncertain men can learn." What she felt for Kang Min-jun had not gone away. Ji-won was too honest with herself for convenient emotional revision. But feelings and trust were different things. Trust wasn't rebuilt through declarations or grand moments. It was rebuilt through the accumulation of small, consistent, unremarkable days. Kang Min-jun was accumulating them. He had not said he loved her since the night at the restaurant. Not because he didn't, she was fairly certain he did, in whatever the most complete version of that word could mean for a man who had spent 42 years avoiding vulnerability. But because he was, for the first time in his life, more committed to what she needed than to what he wanted. That, more than anything, was what she hadn't expected from him. On a Sunday evening, when spring had finally come to Busan, the kind of spring that makes you believe in redemption, all new growth and soft light, Kang Min-jun was sitting on Ji-won's back porch with their daughter asleep against his chest. The baby breathed in the slow, total way that only sleeping infants breathe. Like the entire world was temporarily safe. Like nothing could touch her here. Ji-won came outside with 2 cups of coffee, ginseng, the way she knew he liked it, and sat across from him at the small table overlooking the garden. For a while they didn't say anything. The city was quiet. The evening air carried the scent of a coastal spring, salt and blooming flowers, and the promise of something changing. Their daughter breathed in that steady, peaceful way, and for a moment the world held perfectly still. "I want to tell you something," Kang Min-jun said finally. "Not going to ask you for anything. I just want to say it." Ji-won looked at him. "I think about what I did every day," he continued. "Not with guilt as a performance, just as a fact I carry. A weight I chose to carry because you didn't deserve to carry it alone. And I think about who you are, who you've always been. And I think about how I almost..." He stopped. He looked down at the baby on his chest for a moment. "I almost destroyed something I had no right to touch. Someone I should have protected instead of tried to own." Ji-won was quiet. "I know I'm not done earning this," he said. "I know I may never be done. But I'm not saying it to ask you to move forward. I'm saying it because you deserve to know that I see it clearly. Not the version that's flattering to me. The real one. The damage I caused. The person I was. The person I'm trying to become." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I know you do. I've been watching you. For months now. And I see it. The work. The consistency. The fact that you show up even when it would be easier not to." He looked at her. "I'm not ready to say everything is okay," she continued. "I don't know if it ever will be exactly. But I think..." She paused, searching for the right words. "I think there might be a version of us that's possible. A real one. Not what you tried to engineer. Something actually built. Something that exists because we both chose it. Every single day. With eyes open. Understanding exactly what happened and what it cost." "I don't deserve that," Kang Min-jun said. "No," Ji-won agreed. "You don't. But she does." She looked at the sleeping baby between them. "And I think you're becoming someone who might actually be worth building with." Kang Min-jun had walked into the world's toughest boardrooms and never once lost his composure. But sitting on a porch in Busan with his daughter asleep on his chest, and the only woman he had ever truly loved telling him she might be willing to try again in some real, uncontrolled, genuine way. He could not find a single word. So he nodded. She picked up her coffee and smiled, a real smile, not a performance but the beginning of something. And they sat together in the quiet until the city went dark and the stars came out over the harbor. Each of them holding their daughter. Each of them understanding that some things can only be built slowly, through time and honesty and the daily choice to show up. The day Kang Min-jun tried to secure love through control, he nearly lost everything. The day he finally learned to let go, to stop trying to possess what could only ever be freely given, was the day he began to earn the family he had always wanted. Not the family he had manufactured through manipulation. The real one, built on trust, built on time, built on the daily choice to show up and be better than yesterday. If this story moved you, and I hope it did, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment down below. Tell the Vault family. Do you believe in redemption? Can love survive betrayal? Was Kang Min-jun's transformation real? Or will trust always be broken? And if you're watching this with someone you trust, share it with them. Because sometimes the stories that hurt us the most are the ones we need to hear. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Because the Vault family is always growing, and we're just getting started. I'm your host. This is Story Vault. And we are everywhere good stories are told.